I always thought that I was an oddity, right? Like I had a lower number of close friends than most people would. I think that that's not quite the case.
With astrology, you could say, okay, I understand where this comes from. I understand why this is the way you react to certain situations the way you do. And I either choose to accept that about you or I don't. Hello, and welcome to Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. I am Leah Lilly, one of your hosts, and I am joined as always by my co-host, Matt Carlberg. We aim to bridge the gap between my study of astrology and Matt's study of psychology and sociology. Each week we discuss a specific theme and approach it from two different perspectives to come to a deeper understanding from both an astrological and psychological perspective.
If you missed out on any of our previous episodes, you can catch up at leahlilly.com/full circle podcast or on Spotify and iTunes by searching for Full Circle Podcast. Most of the memories I have from my time growing up are of my friends, and I think that that's probably true for most people. I remember playing Pokemon on the Game Boy together. I remember going outside and playing touch football or building forts in the woods. And I actually remember a specific game we used to play. We had an electric cattle fence in our backyard, and me and my friends used to go out and see who could hold on to it the longest. And the problem was that the electricity would cause your hand to cramp up and you couldn't let go. And I don't know how we ever got away from playing it, but I don't do that kind of thing anymore. Nowadays, my friends and I go out to dinner, we watch a movie, we play games at someone's house. The point is that these friendships have changed over time. And that's what we want to talk about today. How can we define friendship? And how do these special relationships change throughout our lives? Give us the weather girl.
Let's talk about what's going on astrologically. We are in the second week of Libra season, so I wanted to share a little bit of Libra mythology with you all. If you remember from our love languages episode, we talked a little bit about Virgo as we were in Virgo season. So Astrea was the last immortal to leave Earth, and she became the constellation Virgo. Libra is the depiction of the scales that Virgo held. So because Astrea was the virgin goddess of justice and the primary caretaker of humanity, she's depicted holding these scales. So these two signs, Virgo and Libra, are connected in a really deep way, as the two are eventually divided into the two different zodiac signs that we now have today. One is a part of the other, and they always will be. And Virgo and Libra have a really special and unique bond and connection because of that. Libra also represents beauty. We talked a little bit last week about balance, which is associated with Libra, but I wanted to talk a little bit about beauty this week. Ruled by Venus, which is the planet of how and what we love, as well as beauty in the world, Libra is going to take that sort of beauty in a myriad of different ways under its umbrella. This asks us how we can bring in and create more beauty in the world around us. And this could be on a large scale, but it could also be as simple as looking at your own physical space and world and asking yourself how you can fill the world around you with beauty that appeals to you. So does your space maybe need a little spruce? Could a certain room in your house use a plant or some new art? Or maybe you could spend some time picking up trash around your neighborhood. Anything to make your physical space more beautiful. Last Saturday, we also had a new moon in Libra. And that new moon asked us to look at how we were showing up in our relationships and for ourselves. So I hope you had some time over the weekend to connect to your heart and the love within it. And if you didn't, you've got the rest of Libra season to keep connecting. There's a lot of internal energy going on in the midst of asking us to connect. Retrogrades are going to push us internal while Libra season is asking us to relate to others. So it's about finding the way in which you can care for yourself so that others know how to treat you and you can properly care for others. This week, we're also going to see Pluto go direct in Capricorn on October 3rd, Thursday, after a few months of retrograde. This is going to mean that our deepest desires will begin to surface. They've been buried or repressed over the last couple of months, so it's time to confront some of the deep, dark parts of ourselves that have maybe been hidden away. Be honest with yourself about who you are and what you desire, and move from keeping those things in the dark to bringing them into the light. Mercury moves into Scorpio on October 3rd, which is going to create a time to learn and acquire some new knowledge and depth around something. So this is going to encourage us to pick an area of study, get super curious, and just be ready to learn all that we can. And Mars is going to move into Libra on October 4th. And if you remember from when I shared some of my personal astrology, Mars isn't always super happy in Libra. Mars is a planet of assertion, of taking action, of going after what we want. And Mars moving into Libra is going to create a little bit more of a balance around that. So it might not create all of this direct action that we're used to seeing from Mars, but instead ask us to pick the right moment to take action. In thinking about friends for this week, I actually had this really funny memory come up. And, in your introduction this week, you shared some of the memories that you have with your friends when you were younger. And I think you're right that a lot of the memories that I have of being younger surround things that I was doing with my friends. And one of those things, I had this wonderful friend, her name is Lauren, and we were so close growing up. She lived down the street from me. We hung out all the time. And this was at a time when the internet was up and coming, I guess you could say. And so we spent a lot of time watching videos on YouTube and just combing the internet for all the wonders that it had to offer. One of the things that we came across was this website, and it's called Making Fiends. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. We, in preparation for the episode, spent a little bit of time looking at the site, but I have not visited it. I've never heard of it. And to be honest, the stuff that you showed me sounded kind of weird. And I'm hoping that you can provide a little bit of clarity on what this website actually is.
That's a good question. I don't even really know if I have a firm grasp on what it is, but essentially it's a mini TV series that I guess we stumbled across. And it's a comedy horror animated series. And I guess it was created in 2008.
What is that? A horror comedy? What? I don't even understand how all of that stuff fits together. What is it about? What is this series even about?
So it's about this little evil child named Vendetta. And there's another little girl named Charlotte who comes to the school that Vendetta goes to. And Vendetta just hates her and tries to destroy Charlotte in every episode. She just creates like these little fiends that she tries to have them like eat her or kill her. And Charlotte's just like kind of oblivious and really happy, and like her sort of dumbness saves her every episode. But it's really interesting because this series is actually Nickelodeon Animation Studios' first animated series to be based on a web series.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So in other words, there are kids out there that like have watched this show and like know what it is.
I have never met anyone else who knows what it is besides Lauren. So it's so funny because often I want to quote it or I want to say something from it or I want to sing the theme song, and I know no one will know what I'm talking about.
That is a safe assumption.
Because I never saw it on
I've never heard of
TV.
it.
I only ever saw it on the website. And the website's really cute because as you move your cursor over certain things make little like creepy noises. It was just really, as a kid, it was really fun. And I guess too, with this new thing of the internet, of being able to watch stuff and discover stuff, it was like, whoa, this is so funny and cool. And we were just obsessed with it. We were obsessed with it.
I am blown away. I think, me and my friends watched videos, but no horror comedy web series that turned into a Nickelodeon TV series. We watched the viral videos at like Numa Numa, like everybody knows Numa Numa, a bunch of stuff like that. I did not think that you could ever get deeper into the internet than I was, but you made it.
Oh,
you're there.
trust me, I found some depths. One more
Uh-huh.
interesting fact about this show. So like I said, I never saw the series on television, and it premiered with no promotion or press release, which is probably why I didn't know it existed. And at one point, it was the highest rated original program on Nicktoons, but then it was canceled after 6 episodes.
It's weird. It's weird because like some of the things that you're saying are like, wow, this show is really popular. How did I never hear about it? And then some other things that you're saying, it's like, no, nobody knew what this show is. Like nobody had any idea what was going on. Of course I never heard of it. But I don't know. I'm just gonna have to look forward to show notes, I think. I have no idea what the show is, but maybe it's gonna be my new favorite thing to watch. Who knows?
Oh, you're definitely going to watch every episode if you want to remain friends.
Oh, is that? I didn't know that our friendship was so conditional. I had no idea that it comes down to whether I watch this old web series that you and your neighbor found 10 years ago,
She's not my
15 years ago.
neighbor. She's my best friend, number
Okay.
one. And number two, maybe in the academic portion, we'll talk about some of the conditions of friendship and whether there are any.
Oh, look at you. Look at you just wrapping it all back to the podcast. I'm beyond impressed.
Look at the big
Beyond
brain
impressed.
on Brett.
Is that a reference from the Making Fiends show?
No, oh my God. Come on. That's freaking Quentin Tarantino level, dude.
Well, you already decided you didn't want to be my friend, so I'm just going to add to the fire at this point.
Good plan.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Our featured business this week is Thesis Books. This is one of the only places where you can judge a book by its cover. This unique business offers incredible and one-of-a-kind hand-bound journals and books. Thesis Books seeks to share imagination and curiosity with adventure of all kinds. They believe that each of us is full of personality and that what you write, draw, or read should reflect that. You're bound to like this amazing and creative business. Whether you're an avid reader or just looking for a nice planner, turn the page to thesisbooks.com. Take a look, it's in a book, so head on over to thesisbooks.com.
Matt, what is your favorite book of all time?
The King Killer Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss.
What is that about?
It's about the King Killer. No, it's a fantasy magic novel where a kid wants to go to a school to learn how to do magic, and there's this really bad thing in the world that is always kind of skirting around, and he, at some point, I believe, is going to rid the world of whatever this evil thing is.
Are you sure this book isn't Harry Potter?
It's, the way I described it, remarkably similar, but it is a very different book. I think that it is a better book series. Now it's time to really dig into the nitty-gritty of our theme this week, which is friendships and how they change over time. Generally, what I want to talk about over the next part of the segment here is the types of friendships that we have, how they're formed and maintained, and then I'll wrap up with how I view them changing and how we can see them change through empirical data. And then we'll jump into all of Lea's astrology perspective right after that. So first off, we'll start with the various types of friendships that we have. And I'm going to jump all the way back to ancient Greece with Aristotle, who was an early psychologist, although he probably didn't know it at the time. So he suggests that there's 3 types of friendship, and each one is based on one of the following: utility, sensual pleasure, and virtue. Utility friendships are our coworkers and our classmates. It's the people that we have friendships with because it makes life easier. We're going to see them every day. Might as well form that relationship with them. The next one is a sensual friendship. And sensual, I get in today's context, would indicate some sort of sexual friendship, but Aristotle really just means that it's pleasurable. So this is the person that You'll hang out with them on a Friday night when you all go out, or you would invite to a party of some sort, but you wouldn't necessarily want to get coffee with them one on one the next day. It's somebody who is entertaining and brings value to that friendship, but isn't quite on the level of virtue, which is the true friendship. So these are the close friends that we have, and we have these friends through a shared set of values and principles. It is typically a selfless and constructive relationship. It has both. And we aim to help each other recognize our full potential. And these are the most sustainable friendships. If you look over the course of time, your virtuous friendships are the ones that should have the most longevity.
Does each type of friendship only fit into a certain category or can they overlap?
The way that Aristotle would look at it, you at any given time, your friendship would be in one of these areas. So it's not to say that like a utility friendship couldn't turn into more. And I think in a lot of cases, and we'll talk about this actually a little bit later on in my part of the segment, those utility friendships can quickly turn into virtuous friendships. But I don't believe that you would have a utility friendship that is also a virtuous one. It is one or the other from a classification perspective.
Gotcha.
Let's dig into that a little bit more with a theory from sociology. It's a pretty commonly held belief, but I'm going to attribute it here specifically to Rebecca Adams, who's a professor at UNC. Really, the way that we develop these virtuous friendships comes about, again, through the magic of three, through proximity, through repeated and unplanned interactions, and providing a setting that encourages people to let their guard down and confide in each other. So again, to quickly define these, proximities are really about having the closeness of the relationship. So it's easier to be friends with somebody that we live next door to than it is to be friends with somebody who lives the next town over, the next state over, the next country over. The idea is the closer it is, the easier it is. And there's been a lot of interesting research recently due to the internet and what's called false proximity. So it is a lot easier now than it would have been, say, 50 years ago to maintain those relationships even when you aren't close in proximal distance. Next up, we have repeated and unplanned interactions. The idea is that we need to spontaneously be around these people to have friendships. Think about school extracurriculars, or as an adult, you're heading to the dog park at the same time. Those are the types of interactions that we're talking about here. When you think back to middle school, high school, even college, the people that you tend to be friends with are the ones that are in your fraternity or sorority. Or I know for me, we've talked about the fact that I did theater a lot. A lot of my friends came from the theater department. The last one is confiding in each other. And this is really about providing a safe space to be vulnerable and feel comfortable sharing parts of yourself that you wouldn't share in some of those other friendships. So, for example, Leah, I know I would consider us to have a virtuous friendship, a virtuous relationship, and we feel comfortable talking about some of those things that maybe I wouldn't share at work or share in a group of people that I just met.
Definitely. So these three things can overlap, right? Like all of these are the elements that sort of determine which, I guess, level of friendship you have. Is that right?
Yeah, so these three are specifically about getting to the close friendship level, that virtuous relationship that Aristotle talks about. So the point here is you need to have these three things, because if you feel comfortable confiding in each other, but you're not physically close and you don't have these interactions just throughout the day spontaneously, the idea is that you wouldn't be as close as somebody who you see on a day-to-day basis and feel comfortable sharing those things with. Now we get to the second part of the theme, which is how do these friendships that we've cultivated change over time? And really what we see is a bell curve with a really long tail as we get older. So in other words, when we're younger, we don't have as many friends. The number of friends that we have peaks right in like mid 20s, early 20s time frame, and then it slowly decreases throughout the rest of our lives. And I'll share a little bonus fact at the end about people who are 65 and older. The reasoning behind this is when you think about the level of independence that we have, when we start out our friendship cultivating career, we're really limited, right? You're 8 years old, you rely on your parents for every ride that you get. So the number of friends that you have is really limited to your neighborhood or your class at school. We start to see that number increase as our independence increases and we start to experience some of the extracurriculars and things like that that I was talking about. So in high school and college, when we can drive and maybe start living on our own, the number of friends that we have increases greatly. However, once we graduate from college and go into the working world, start to, we get married, we have kids, we start to do those major milestones in life and start to get really just busier. And as we get busier, we start to see the number of relationships decrease. And that's not to say that we have fewer friends. We're just tightening that circle. So here, what we're seeing is I know who I am better now than I did when I was 16. And so as my interests start to cement, my friend group starts to shrink to people that are interested in those things too. Because I have limited time, I need to focus that time for friends that I have with more specific people. The last couple of facts that I found particularly interesting and wanted to share is that we can occasionally see another uptick once we're over 65. And the idea here is we're retired, so all that free time starts to open up, and we don't have kids in the house, so we have even more free time. And it's that empty nest idea of, okay, now I need to find some more hobbies and more people to spend time with because, I have all this time open in my life and I'm looking for that kind of interaction. I also think that retirement homes bring on like that college experience again, where we're all in a close knit space and we have limited independence, in some cases can't drive anymore, things like that. So I found that very interesting. And the other thing that I found interesting is that adults, on average, have 5 people that they would consider close friends.
Wow. It's funny because I think as an adult, you think it should be more. And I've found myself kind of coming up against that too of like, should I have more close friends? What does this mean? I don't know. But then to hear that kind of on average, it's 5.
And I think with any average, right, it changes depending on the person. And there are some people who need more and some people who need less. But I do think 5 is a low number to me. I would say it's pretty close, at least, to the number of people that I would consider like very close friends based off how we've defined it thus far. But I always thought that I was an oddity, right? Like I had a lower number of close friends than most people would. I think that that's not quite the case.
It's also fascinating to me to look at this bell curve and notice the trend of when we sort of peak in the amount of friends, I guess on average, really, that we have. And to see it depicted in that way, because it's not the way I ever thought of friendship.
Yeah, I think it really helped illustrate the concepts for me. And I'll admit the data is a little bit old and it focuses specifically on Facebook. But I think that this bell curve illustrates data that I saw replicated elsewhere. And so I think that it is an effective way to view those trends. And I'll admit it caught me a little off guard as well. I expected it to continue to increase later into life, but we definitely see a sharp decrease once we leave those early 20s, mid 20s.
I really like that you brought up looking at where we are situationally during those times. Early 20s, we're in college. So we have, exactly like you mentioned, that space to sort of create a community, and because we are limited in certain ways to being there. And then as we get out of college and have more independence, it sort of is a choice of what you do with it, whether you do spend that independent time that you have cultivating a community or whether you're cultivating your interests or, whatever you're doing with it.
One of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about is the early 20 time frame where, you and I were in school. And not everybody goes to school, but this trend would still apply to them. And the reason for that is it is the time of our lives where the balance between independence and life responsibility is the most unequal. We are out of our parents' homes for potentially the first time. And most of the time, we're not married, we don't have kids. So we have this brand new world to explore without a lot of things pulling us in a different direction. And so it is the time where we start to explore, like, what am I interested in? And who are the people that are doing these things? And, how do I become a part of that community? And then as we move into the more responsibility later in life, that's when we start to cull the masses and find those activities that we're truly, truly interested in.
When looking at friendship from an astrological perspective, that's a really big part of it, is knowing yourself and knowing what your interests are. So just in general, astrology is a really, really huge asset to friendship. Because when you know your personal astrology and how it relates with the people in your life, you can more fully accept and support yourself and accept and support them. Usually we figure these things out slowly over time as we get to know people. So we find the things that we have in common, we also learn about our differences, and we come across all of that information through the different experiences that we have with the people in our lives. And I think this can be one of the big causes behind changing friendships, right? Is when we cannot accept each other's differences because we ourselves are growing, up leveling, and changing. And those around us are also doing the same, but sometimes in different ways, at different rates. So we may not always be growing together, and that can be really hard. That's when we see sort of these changes in friendships happen, and we sort of move through these periods of maybe being alone on our own, wondering, okay, who am I? What do I want to spend my time doing? What do I like? What are my hobbies? Where are the people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in? We all change. So if you want to understand the changes better, you can use astrology to do that.
Would you say that when we think about the astrology of our friends, are we looking for people with complementary astrology to us? Or is it more just being aware of the differences so that you can accommodate them within the friendship?
I would say it's both. I've noticed finding people with complementary astrology can be really beneficial. As we talked about at the beginning of this episode, Virgo and Libra have this really awesome bond in chemistry. And I, as a Virgo, when I come across another Libra, I notice that. And I notice the ways in which we complement each other. But on the other side of that, finding people who have different astrology than you can also be helpful in helping you learn and grow as a person. It's kind of that idea of opposites attract, but it's what you do with that. Because some say opposites attract, but then they repel, right? It's like when you have two different forces of magnets and you're trying to force them together. But what can we learn from that? What can you learn from the things that don't necessarily fit? What is that telling you about yourself? And what is that telling you about boundaries and what you will stand for in a friendship and what you won't? And noticing when maybe it's unhealthy versus this is just a challenge that could use a little bit of extra care in us negotiating like this problem that we've come up against. I don't like that you chew with your mouth open. Can I live with that, or is it going to ruin our friendship? Or, can we have a conversation about it? Can we talk about it? And with astrology, you could say, okay, I understand where this comes from. I understand why this is the way you react to certain situations the way you do. And I either choose to accept that about you or I don't.
Can we put on the record that I don't chew with my mouth open?
Thank goodness, because that might be a boundary for me, Matt.
I think that the point holds true, right? Like, one of the things that I always think of is that motivations matter, right? Like, I might do the wrong thing, but if my heart was in the right place, it's a lot different than if I was doing it maliciously. And so I think understanding those motivations and why we do what we do is a critical part to any friendship.
Right. And that's what astrology is the motivation behind why we do what we do. And it's one thing to say, okay, so and so friend, you said this thing, it really hurt my feelings. What is the deal with that? And having them try to explain why they said it, where they were when they said it, where it came from. And often we've made up, in our head, they were saying it maliciously. They did it to hurt me. And we've attached to that feeling. It's like, no, I've come to this conversation and I'm upset. I'm upset and I'm hurt and I'm holding on to that. And I'm holding on to the fact that your intention was malicious, even though you are explaining to me that it wasn't and this is where it came from. And astrology is kind of a little bit more of a concrete way of saying, listen, this is how I relate to stressful situations. I have a way of being very direct that hurts some people. Knowing that I am more direct and you are more sensitive, that's going to cause a little bit of a rift for us. So how can I be aware of your sensitivity, and how can I be aware of maybe being a little less direct with you because it doesn't speak to you in the way that makes you feel loved in our friendship? And we've come up against that too. And we'll talk about more details of friendship and our friendship in the next episode. But even just those little things and looking at our astrology and how we complement each other as friends in preparation for this episode is really interesting. So even just some of the very basic things, right? Me being an earth sign, a Virgo, you being an air sign, a Gemini, those two things, the way that air and earth, those two elements relate, can tell us a lot about our friendship. So for example, I am really, really grounded. I'm in the physical world very deeply, and sometimes I get too focused on what's right in front of me, what's happening here, and can't always let go. And you as an air sign kind of operate more in the field of ideas and thinking and the brain. And so it's not always as easy for you to maybe understand why I'm holding on to something so intensely and why I can't just separate myself and think about it in a different way. So in that way, we kind of complement each other. But then also when we get into really tense situations where I'm upset about something and you're like, can you step outside of yourself and see it like this? And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm just really, really upset. Then we start to get to that point where we say, okay, can I accept that that's just where you are and give you support the best way I know how, the best way I can, while you deal with whatever this is. Another really interesting thing, Virgo and Gemini are both ruled by Mercury. Matt and I are both ruled by the same planet, which means we both love to communicate. And I would say we have pretty awesome communication in our relationship because of that. And also, it's probably a huge reason why we're friends, because we have the mental capacity to hold space for each other in ways that maybe our other friends aren't able to do for us. How would you say our communication has fared in our relationship, Matt?
Great.
That's Mercury for you.
No, I would totally agree. I think that we both are comfortable and we have worked hard to create an environment, as the sociological theory would say, where we feel comfortable sharing those things. And hey, we've had some tough conversations over the years about hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this. And it's not confrontational in a bad way, but it is confrontation that I think would be uncomfortable in a lot of other relationships. And we have cultivated a space that allows us to communicate in that way. And I think it is something that I aspire to in my other close relationships, is to make sure that, hey, if I've done something that has affected you in a particular way, let's talk about it, because I care about you as a person and I don't want to affect you in a negative way. So if we talk about it, then I can understand where you're at, you can understand, my motivations, and we can move on from it and be stronger because of the conversation. And I think that you and I have done that in a really effective way.
Right. And I would agree that I would hope that I'm able to have that level of conversation in my other friendships and relationships, because it is important to me, but also knowing, okay, some people are not ruled by a communication element or planet and can't come to the table in the same way that I can. So when that happens, what am I able to do with that person? And knowing that our friendships are just going to be different and they need different things. But the most important thing that I will say about all of this and about astrology as it relates to friendship is that knowing yourself and your astrology is the most important step. And it's the first step. It is the first thing to do, because when you know, okay, I am ruled by Mercury, which means that communication is an important element to me, I am probably not going to get along very well with people who don't have the ability to communicate in the way that kind of fuels my fire. And knowing that, and if I do meet somebody who does have a different element, but maybe doesn't have that communication element, it's like, okay, is this a make or break for me? And understanding where that lies and understanding how you can potentially step outside of yourself to accommodate somebody else if that feels right to you, but not doing that all the time, because that's when you start to get into draining friendships, or when you start to be drained because you are stepping out of who you are so often to accommodate somebody else that you do not feel fulfilled. And friendship is a two-way street. It's a two-way street. It's got to be fulfilling on both ends for it to feel like it's adding value to your life. This week, our tarot card for the week is the Ace of Swords. And the Ace of Swords is a really powerful card of clarity. Aces in general are just powerful cards of beginnings, and the sword in this case represents mental clarity. So depicted on this card from the fountain deck, you can see a sword piercing through some structured looking framework. And this means that a rare opportunity for really powerful clarity and a fresh start is near. And it's going to cut through the framework of all the BS that you may have built up for yourself. A new approach is near, so be aware and pay attention to your thoughts and actions during this time, and take a moment to get clear so that you can have this new beginning. And especially since we're in Libra season, we've been talking a lot about relationships. This might have something to do with your relationships, clarity around your friendships, around your partnerships, and new beginnings based on that.
Mental clarity is a phrase that really resonates with me from the tarot card for this week. I wanted to bring my psychological wellness tip in line with that phrase. We spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about mindfulness and being actively engaged in the things that you're doing. And so this week, I want to bring to the forefront of our minds the idea of meditation. Meditation can help you reset throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be the sitting cross-legged on the floor with incense burning. You can do what's called a waking meditation. In both cases, the idea is really just to be mindful and focus on what is at hand. Give your attention to the task or the person, and that will help you experience it more fully and do a better job of completing the task or interacting with, maybe in this case, your friend.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. If you want to learn more about us or hear previous episodes, you can visit lealily.com/fullcirclepodcast. There you can find previous episodes and also our show notes, where we include previous tarot polls, links, and more extras from each of our episodes. You can also engage with us on Twitter at fullcircle_pod. And we also have a community on Facebook under Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast, where we hope to communicate and talk with you. You can share your insights, your thoughts on our themes, and more in that community. If you want to listen to more of our episodes, we are on Spotify and iTunes, and also on my website. We release new episodes every Monday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.